of the month-long online lectures series. Today we have Dr. Smita Patil from IGNOU. She's from the Department of Gender Studies. On behalf of the center, I welcome her, and we are all very eager to listen to her. I'll now request Dr. Sangeeta Desai to introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patil Sate. Good afternoon to everyone. And this is, as Dr. Patil has already mentioned, this is the 5th session of this month-long series on gender sensitization and capacity development program organized by RCWS in collaboration with UGC. Today's resource person is Dr. Smita Patil. She currently serves as the Assistant Professor in School of Gender and Development Studies, IGNOU, New Delhi. She has earned her MPhil and PhD from Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She is a recipient of prestigious fellowships, to name a few: Asia Leadership Fellow Program 2017, Research Excellence Program USC India Fellowship, University of Santiago de Compostela, Spain, the Australia-India Council Junior Fellowship at National Center for Australian Studies at Monash University, Melbourne, and doctoral fellowship of Center for the Study of Developing Studies and Indian Council of Social Science Research. Her areas of interest are women and gender studies, gender and law, political theory, and social theory. She has various publications to her credit. She has published on the areas of caste, gender, politics, and education. We welcome Dr. Smita Patil. Just a few instructions before we begin to the participants. Please mute your audios and videos. This session will be of 40 minutes lecture followed by 10 minutes for question and answers. So participants are requested to post their questions in the chat box, and at the end of the 40-minute session, we will be taking each of your questions. Welcome, Dr. Smita Patil. We are eager to hear.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta Desai. Am I audible?
Smita, you are. Yeah. Vatsala, I'm sorry to intervene, but in fact, there are messages in the chat box that participants are not able to hear. Sorry. Vatsala?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now
able to see. We can hear each other. We can see each other. So there is no issue. I'm just posting the Facebook link also. So if any participants are not able to join here, so they can join through.
Okay. Yes. So sorry.
I'm just posting the link.
Yeah. So sorry. We start. Smita, please.
Yeah. Let me thank Dr. Sangeeta Desai for introducing me. And before I begin, let me thank to SNDT, Women's University and Resource Center for Women's Studies and UGC, and especially to Dr. Patil Sate to invite me to speak here and, sort of express my ideas on these issues of humanitarian crisis during COVID-19 pandemic. I was thinking a lot about what title I should give, since I've been teaching gender studies from past, several years. And gender sensitization, usually we are dealing with so many issues like, the debates on vast areas, which also includes that, gender, labor, patriarchy, violence. And we experienced from past several months as COVID-19 pandemic entered into life of each of us, we categorically see that how it has, changed the life of each one of us. So I thought of that, the ways in which that we are actually grappling with these ideas of the scavenger community in India, and the ways in which, during the pandemic time, that there was very less literature which was available, and that too particularly in context of, the scavenging woman. I did not see much of the very well-researched article even today, except that in general, a few articles which appeared, and very few books like, Geeta Ramaswamy's book, India's Thinking, and other social activists and see sort of, the civil society organization have taken up this issue before pandemic. But after pandemic, that, the ways in which that the shifts have been taken place. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is that I'll begin in the first part, the whole idea that how, this debate emerged about the scavenging communities, and then eventually shifting to the, legal trains, what had happened in India past 70 years. I would of course limit myself because I'm not going to in detail speak about each of the laws, but I would touch upon few of the important intervention, and then coming back to the, in the second part, which is going to engage in order to understand the situation of, the women from the scavenging community. Of course, they are Dalit women, but then as many of the, scholars pointed out that they are untouchables among the untouchable, which is also very true. And then later on, then I'm trying to look at and figure out what are the possible ways in which that, the government can take the initiative in order to understand, because these are of course in, there's of course been a shift, which I'm going to go and speak. And then I'm going to overall trying to offer a critique to this debate through this engagement, in order to understand that what should be the feminist take future, and how we should take forward these debates. Because as a gender school I teach in a gender school, and I often say to my student, and also saying through this forum, that one has to really think, and one should be very sensible enough to think about the everyday life of the human being, and how we can actually serve the humanity in a dignified manner. So it is a responsibility of the individual and the collective and the society, to to retain that humanitarian approach in the everyday life. And then I think possibly that is one way actually to come out in this. So let me start by, formulating few questions. Who are basically those scavengers? And how they actually, and one should look at those category and how it had been looked at. I think it's known to all of us, the scavengers are the community who comes from a Dalit community. They are in the margin, and they have been, probably, I mean, in every place of India, you could see them. For instance, that if one is looking at the category of scavenger, of course, that there's a direct relationship in which one can associate it with them, with the occupation. It has been, they have sort of fragmented identities and the name in a different places in India, in different states. Like in Maharashtra, we call it Bhangi. In Bihar, it has been called as Do in Bihar and Bengal. It's Eastern India again. Then in North India, it is called in UP and other places, it has been called as a Valmiki community. So the different names have been there given to this community at different places. The main job which the occupation which they are doing is due to the poverty, and there's a whole issue which one has to engage very seriously in order to understand these debates of the poverty, occupation, and the scavenging, because Mumbai is one of the place where the wonderful studies has been done by TISS, and I could name some of them. It's like Shailosh Darakar has done wonderful study way back in 2007-8 about the scavenging community. But of course, that the gender aspect is missing in most of the studies, which I already mentioned. Scavengers are the community who clean the dry toilets, they clean sewer, septic tanks, and also they are forced to carry actually on their head the dry latrines. They are the one who goes into the manholes, gutters, septic tanks. If you look at the figure and the data, because the data is again very questionable, because we do not have any evidence to substantiate the argument. By Government of India has never done a survey that how many people are actually there who are into this. But the study which have done earlier by scholars on scavenging community, it's around 1.2 million people are into this, profession. And if we further look at this, uh, uh, I mean that how many men and women, the 95% of the men are part of this scavenging job, and the 98% are the women. And I'm drawing these figures from Biswara Wilson, who is a social activist, and he himself comes from this community. If you read this book, which I mentioned earlier about the Gita Ramaswamy's, in which he wrote the, the forwarding of that book, you can categorically see what kind of life of the woman and the community lives in. There are few autobiographies which are out and translated. One of them is Om Prakash. One can actually relate and engage with those debates further, that is there is any change over a period of time in the 70 years. One of the argument which I would like to draw from Gopal Guru's work is that, the power of touch. He wrote one wonderful article way back, in which it was, I think, written in 2006, in which he argued that, how the scavenging community and particularly the woman has been seen. Because, if you go still in the villages, there are dry toilets, and the dry latrine has been lifted by those women from this community. So it's been very important to understand that, how the scavenger came to the cities. And many scholars argued, and I also personally, agree with these arguments as a scholar of these studies, that most of them come from the rural India. Because they were once upon a time agricultural labor, and they moved on because of the poverty in search of job. There's no education. So because of that, they moved to the cities. And it is again a colonial construction, because during the British time, it is the Britishers who gave them, sort of job from coming from the rural India to the urban area, because the modernization process was going on. For instance, that the railway, you could still see that in the railway that the women are working. At the same time that you would see that the agricultural laborers, when the crops are failure, for the survival they move out the agriculture. So they become ideally the migrant laborers. And number of studies which have came out on urban studies, if you look and analyze the work of number of scholars, it is quite clear to understand that the urban labor market actually pushed them into this kind of work. So eventually you would see that the urban labor market which pushed them into this, and as that, if you look at the colonial debates, it categorically shows us that during the British time, these people who were very, very deprived and poor came into the cities. Although it was not the cities what we see today, but it was taking the modernization process, building the bridges and all. And eventually that, of course, the work is not something that time which is again very organized kind of work. It was not. But as you see that India becomes independent slowly, and this, the municipal corporation which got established, these people were, as a laborer, were hired, and they also joined, they were hired actually into those local bodies, municipal bodies, and several other bodies to do this manual work of scavenging. So these are, of course, informal sectors, right? And as I mentioned to you that even that, you know, the Martin McMahon and the others, they also argued that it is a majority of the number of women who were pushed into this, you know, so-called organized sector. And my own studies during my PhD work, which I have done in Ahmednagar, and I have collected interviews in 2007, in which that it was very visible and clear that because in the organized sector, the job is retained. So state also, and one of the argument which is very, very clear here is that the state actually is reproducing the caste and stigma, because this is something that one has to also understand in organized sector. For instance, if you go and look at the municipal corporation, even in small and the places also, you can understand that the job is there because the housing in the big cities is a major problem for these people. And the survival question is also one of the bigger issue because of the lack of education, poverty, and also that the socio-economic factor, which are also responsible, which has also the, you know, the interlinkages to the entire problem. And one would see that, you know, if, for instance, in one family, if the mother is working as a, you know, as a scavenger, or the Safai Karmachari, say in the hospital, which is government hospital, or in the university, or, you know, any public sector, as she's going to go and return, she or he takes the VRS. And majority of them is the women, because that it is then again going to pass on to the daughter-in-law, which comes in the home, so that there is a consistency that, you know, the job would be returned, the salary will come, even though it might be minimal, even that the whole question of, you know, the dignity labor, which again engages into this, which one has to actually see. But then one has to also see the whole question of the consciousness level of this particular community. And I think that since I've been working on Dalit feminism, I think that the Dalit feminist also, including the mainstream feminists, needs to focus their attention on this issue, because I see it's very, very, very serious issue where we hardly have any data and the findings of each state within that, you know, because, you know, we have the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, which and also the government of India, at back and forth from, you know, before 70 years since then, they actually engage into this, and majority of them, the issues which have come up related with the scavenging community is that the most recent deaths, and Delhi experienced the highest number from past 2-3 years. You know, the men getting into the manhole and then out of the gas, the poisonous gas, which they are dying. So it's been very important to understand that you know, the issue remains focused because of the national you know, conventions which was taken back and forth, and the Safai Karmachari Andolan, which in fact filed the case. And that was the first intervention, but at the same time, when one is looking at 1955, you know, prohibition of the, you know, taking out the untouchability, the act of 1955, then again that, you know, if we again look at SC/ST Atrocity Act of 1989, which is again is that dealing with the atrocities, and one of the ways in which that, you know, the government has actually acknowledged and seen that. But the 1955 Act was again revisited in 1976, And in this act that the government realized that after, when this Untouchability Act was actually uh, formulated, eventually in 1976, when they revisited to make it more stringent and aggressive, because they realized over a period of time that, the atrocity against the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes are not something which the government was during that time expecting will go down or abolish. So it did not happen in that way. So then the law become, and then eventually that, 1989, SCST Atrocity Act, and then again the same act which we have recently seen a few years before, that, some of the sections have been taken out. I'm not going to get into that, the sections have been taken out, but the point which I'm raising here is that when one is talking about SCST Atrocity Act, it deals with particularly the attacks on, the Hindu, Dalit, scavenging community. So one has to really raise this question, because if you look at the urban places particularly, and I can say about the Delhi, majority of the areas in which that you would see the Muslim communities are the scavengers. I mean, there are Dalit Hindus, but the people who migrated from the Bangladesh, so, and they are the now who are residing, that is, they are the one who are doing this job. So one has to also understand that when atrocity happens on them, that this law only if is, accommodating the Hindu Dalits, then what about the rest of them? And I will come to the questioning later on this debate, because why I'm speaking about this, one of the reason I will speak over a period of time. So it's very important actually to see back and forth the ways in which that, this debate image. And I just want to quote that the few debates is that which is, one of the scholars raised question, and I mentioned about this Vada Wilson particularly, in which I quote his talk, and he argues that when a person died, a scavenging community person died, doing, most of them, as I mentioned, most of the male died in, in manholing. When a person died in a septic tank, the doctors and police refused to touch the body, citing untouchability and pollution. So one has to understand that this untouchability and pollution, which again carries throughout their life till they die, but even after death, this kind of, the attitude which is there by the educated people. I mean, they are the one who keeps the city clean. They are the one who are cleaning everything from hospital to cities to, to the railway station to, I mean, we can name anything, right? So one of the intervention which the civil society organization did, and I'm specifically mentioning here the civil society's contribution because so far the scavenger touchability, untouchability discourse was never been taken by academicians seriously. And it was pointed out by Gopal Guru in one of his articles, which I mentioned, touch, the power of touch, the article which he wrote way back, and, using the Foucauldian context also in Frontline in 2006, right? So this, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and the campaigning which we see today even, I mean, this government was pushing forward very, very clear. And they're not very sure about this unclear occupation, what one is going to go and do. So so the point which I'm trying to argue is that one needs to really question here that how do we actually see and engage with this debate further to own understanding, because there are some people like M.N. Srinivasan in his work, which he argues that maybe the possibility that the scavenging community today, which is there, tomorrow the next generation will deny that. And there's a possibility, and the optimism which M.N. Srinivasan argued in his work, by stating that the next generation may not do, and there's a possibility after educating. But the real question remains even that, because some of the feminists in that context also, if we see the Dalit feminist debates, there's a constantly this tension between the mainstream feminist and the Dalit feminists, that in order to understand sexual labor, sex work as a sexual labor, the category of labor to be understood from their point of view or not, in which that the Dalit feminists very strongly argued that they take the position of the Ambedkar, and they quote actually the speech of the Ambedkar, which he gave in Kamatipura, which is there in volume 18, part 2, in which Baba Saheb said that live a life with respect and dignity. And Dalit feminists argue that no woman from any class, caste, community, gender should go. And of course that, the choice and agency, this debate now, which was initially there in 2000 when the bar dancers issue was emerged in Maharashtra, that was there. But I think that no woman, if you give them some alternatives, if the state should create those alternatives, would prefer to go for such kind of job. So in a similar way that the government has to engage in order to, to eradicate the scavenger as an occupation and job. But as I pointed out, the number of scholars and the study shows that these people were hired by the state, and they were very much part of those institutions, like, in which that they have been engaged to keep cleaning those, toilets and sewers and all. And then that it passes from one generation to the other generation. I just want to, cite few examples. If you remember, 3-4 years before in Bangalore, there was a protest. In Bangalore, of course, that many organizations are very active, and they are raising very forcefully this question. In fact, the entire South India, they're raising a lot of questions that scavenging should be stopped. Manual scavenging should be stopped. And one would see that if we look at even that, because the kind of statement which comes in, because it's a we people who elect the government, right? It is we people who elect the member of the parliament. And some of the parliament, and we have experienced and seen that in the COVID, that what kind of statements have come up. But much before the COVID, that, in the Delhi Municipal Corporation, that one of the leader from the ruling party made the statement that those scavenging community people should be called as in health workers, and the swasthya kamgar is the word which is used for them. Now, if that is the case, if we are using that and the member of parliament is actually giving them those kind of, phrases and terms and naming them, but then it's also been a responsibility of any government. I'm not saying that particularly this government or that government. Then it's a responsibility of the government to give them the basic, livelihood. If you go and look at even in the villages, you would see that majority of the women actually carrying the dry shit on their head. And what kind of, wages they're getting? They get rupees 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And someday that they will get beyond 50 once in a while. And sometimes they're not even getting the money. They're not even getting the wages. So you see that what kind of condition and what life they must be living. And I totally disagree with the M.N. Srinivasan's formulation that, maybe the next generation we can. Because this same kind of debate which many of the mainstream feminists are putting forward in order to understand that the category of sex work, they said that the next generation may not. But then where is the infrastructure created by state? And I personally feel that as a scholar, we should not waste much time actually what next generation will do. What we can able to do when we are live here, we should able to do that as a collective consciousness to take forward that in the right direction. So, and I mean, the Constitution has given us that if we look at the Article 17, 15, Article 15, 16, 17, 25, it has given a full freedom to us that. And in the Constitution, it is rightly pointed out that there's no discrimination of any forms of class, caste, gender, and so on. But still, even that, why do we still see the form of the untouchability which is existing there? Because there's a huge discrimination to this community, and there are wonderful studies which came out by one of the scholars called D'Souza in Social Action, in which that the students from this community are narrating their experiences, that how even in the municipality schools, and forget about rest of the school, but the government school itself, that how they have been treated by the teachers and the students. So of course that this leads to from the childhood impact, and what kind of life they must be living as they grow up, what kind of the psychological socioeconomic impact because of the poverty and the constant hammering that they are the children of the scavenger. One has to really seriously think about that. If we analyze even further the study of the Ghanasham Shah, which he have done, and he contributed very interesting article for Gail Bombett's book, Dalits and Democratic Revolution, in which he's mentioning that over a period of time, that it was expected that the untouchability will vanish, but it did not happen. On the other hand, it becomes more stronger, and in the concepts like the purity and pollution over a period of time becomes very, very strong. And this has been again demonstrated by the work of Harshmander and P.K. Mishra's, particularly the autobiographical writings, which they have actually taken and actually done the analysis of that, in which it is very clear that the purity and pollution is still there. Ramesh Kamble has done a very interesting study, and this particular study is about the Bombay Municipal Corporation. And he was trying to look at basically the experiences of the scavengers in the urban settings of the Mumbai. And his finding shows us very clearly that there's a social discrimination and economic exploitation, in which he says that nothing has changed. So caste and stigma remains as it is, and it is in fact, rather than the category of caste and stigma which is there, it did not in fact given any space that over a period of time that we have changed. It retained, and then eventually it becomes a more stringent, in which that the everyday life of the the narratives of the scavenging community, which category shows to us that we need to understand and say. The third important point which I wanted to make is that, I mean, among all male and women, they both are, doing this job, in which you can categorically see that the health issue is one of the very, very severe and critical issues among this community. And particularly that if we look at the ways in which that, the number of laws actually which claims that this woman should be given the basic facilities, which did not happen. And eventually, if we even look at, sorry. Eventually, if we even look at this, particularly the woman category of the woman, particularly within the community, it is of course the community member, the main in the patriarchy within family, are asking and pushing this woman to get into this jobs, right? I mean, poverty is, of course, there is a reason that, poverty is very much there. But then another issue is that some of the study also shows that, because my own findings that women wanted to get out of this because there is a huge stigma and caste. Um, and the women who left, in fact, these jobs, still they are not accepted within the community, within the society, within the, the families have no objection to that, but that social acceptance within community and the society is not still there, because this, she's ultimately comes from this Bhangi community, or the scavenging community. That stigma of the caste is so, I mean, the ways in which it is actually there, and it really makes them upset. So one has to also understand that what psychological trauma these people must be going through in the everyday life. And as I mentioned to you that, particularly in that the finding, I mean, if we look at the woman, most of them then shifted, because it's a municipal corporations and all. Now they are all become the contractual labor, like they are the contract workers now in the same. And there you would see that the as we all of us knows that the Sexual Harassment Act of 2013, and so the abuse, the sexual harassment, payment of wages on the contract basis, it did not happen. But on the other hand, the sexual harassment, and there's always been, you would see the ways in which even the hierarchy, the is which is there within the scavenger, this profession, which, because most of the time the contractors are the male. So there's a, I mean, and I'm narrating one of the narrative of the woman whom I have taken the interview. This is a woman, I'm not mentioning the name. This is a woman who born and brought up in Delhi, and eventually, the parents also used to do this job. And then when she got married, she was also become a part of this to husband's home, in which that she's just 25 years old, right? And she's 12th class. She can able to speak English also. Being studied and working in a small places, she can manage to speak also 2-3 languages. She narrated her story, and I just wanted to cite the story, which is for me very interesting to reveal some of the facts here. In which she said that I born in a family where I have seen that the mothers coming and doing the work all the time. And this is a consistently I have seen, and this is all about many of the interviews which I have taken, a common thing. Since they do the scavenging job, they eat one time a day in the night after they go home. So most of the time the woman, and this again the urban and rural phenomena is very different here. Even though we manage to live a life which we can get 2 times full, but the stigma doesn't go. When we go to the shops, people do not actually like that. They refuse, and they said no need to come to the shops. I mean, and this is the urban places which they do. if they go and nearby shops, because the people nearby knowing that they are the scavengers, and they go and work. So it becomes everyday life. It's very difficult. Even if I work in an unorganized sector, which is a government office, it is very clear that people do not allow me to touch anything in my office. They said keep a distance. If I want to go and speak to anyone, the people, if I have to complain about something, even the matter in which that, they need, by cleaning the toilets, they need the basic things that like powders, Dettol and other things. I was said that, you don't have to write or say. You have to communicate to the other person only verbally from the distance. Water should be carried by me myself. No water will be given even in the hot summer of the Delhi. And there's no question that, and further she argues that, when I went to get, the caste certificate of my child, the officers asked me the caste. And further she said that, the officer said that, why do you want the caste certificate and you want to take the reservation? Anyway, your child has to do this job. I'm just citing this example particularly to just, to narrate the plight of this one particular woman, but there are a number of stories which one can actually, gather and see that what plight must be of these people in the everyday basis. At the same time that if you look at, the rural India, and I'm citing this again example from the Maharashtra, where I've done my, PhD work, but partly some of the people whom I came across, so I happened to take the interviews that I thought of that maybe in future, if I develop my interest, that I can use these interviews. Of course, very less. There's no consciousness and awareness of education, but eventually, it's slowly that, there's a shift. The urban people wanted to basically teach their children, and they don't want that the next generation and children should not get into this this profession. In the rural area, that, the most of the women, they carry the dry sheet, but it's not only the dry sheet. In the rainy time also, even that time, they have their hair fall happens, their complete body stings from, say 6-7 days, even after cleaning. And they said it's very difficult actually to survive the life, because the basic need which is there is that, which we call it in Marathi, Anna Vastra Nivara, food, shelter, home. But they said that the dignity should be also been a part of that. I mean, the government should mandatorily provide to us something. At the same time, that in the urban places, you would see that most of the women who are, in the advanced stage of the pregnancy, and they have to lift and they have to work, even in rural and urban places. And some of them narrated that how the miscarriages happen in the advanced stages also, and then how it was difficult actually because there's no medical services or medical insurance. Even the government of India actually, in 2014, they brought up the law, Supreme Court passed the law actually that, these women should be given those all facilities like organized sector women. But, practically it happens. I mean, we all of us knows that the whole divide between organized, unorganized, unorganized sector. So the real question then is that how do we actually go and engage with this? Some of the women also narrated their stories that, for instance, that before the monsoon, they need us. And now you could see also the changing trend, particularly because in the rural India, most of them, that because of the weather conditions and the climatic condition and the famine and other places, that the crops, have been destroyed, the flood issues, which are in numbers of, disaster which took place suddenly. And as a result, you would see that in most deprived areas, people from the rural India coming from the so-called, I'm using here particularly the untouchable community, which is not constitutional right, but then I'm using here academically to make it very clear that purity, pollution, and untouchability exist, and COVID has given, in fact, very clear picture that what mindset and the people carry in the everyday life. So the before monsoon, that every monsoon that they need, everyone needs that. The city should be clean, so the drainage should be open. So they could, so they have been hired, and then, and there are number of also narratives of the woman which reveals the truth that many times they are not even getting the wages from the tiketars here, right, in the urban places. I want to raise one of the important question, and I would in fact ask the student to read this 2014 very interesting commentary which was written by Dhamma Nigam, right? And uh, Dhamma Nigam is, I think he might be doing, I guess, most probably PhD in Delhi School of Sociology, and he wrote a small commentary which was very, very moving, in which he's arguing that whose vote you want, basically. You want a vote of the scavenger, but do you understand? You come and ask us the vote when there's an election. Have you ever thought that? Because, if you analyze even that 50s onwards, as India got independence, there are a number of the national commissions which was set up, and several committees have been set up to look into this. But I'm very, very, in one way that very positive and engaging to see the young scholar, the lawyers are actually taking this issue very seriously, the lawyer community, because the ways in which the academician never engage from social sciences, but the young lawyers and the legal communities particularly, they are engaging, the young lawyers are engaging, they might be academician, but they're training as a lawyer. So, in one way that at least, the laws are there. Of course, implementation of all laws is a problem in India, and particularly, that we all of us knows. And when it comes to the community, marginal community, gender, and women's issue, then it becomes a more problematic issue. So the one of the key argument of this Dhammanigam in this, that have you ever thought of the socio-economic culture dimension, the ways in which this community live? You are coming and you are asking us the vote. During the vote bank, you just come to our bastis, you peep into our homes, and just pass from the bastis, and then eventually you disappeared after you are elected member. But you never thought, because you never lived a life the way the community and I lived. And it's and further that, the ways in which he's engaging us from the poverty. And then he's raising wonderful questions like that. You do not want to create the education, you do not want to create the schemes and the facilities in such way that we would become conscious, and tomorrow we will raise a question to you. So you want to retain that, that we should only do the scavenging profession. And then further he, it's a very, very moving, very small article, a commentary, in fact, in which Ambedkar's very famous quote, "I'm not a part of art." And he's actually using that in the end of the article, in which he's then raising the question, and he ended with this, articulation of his by saying that, "I'm a scavenger, I do not have any right except one right, that is a voting right, which is equal, which gives a equal right to me." And in order to understand this, that if we again shift, one of the argument which Gopal Guru articulated in one of his essay. I'm not able to remember right now the essay's name, but this book was an edited book, and it is a book something about the empowerment, the title of the book, right? In which Gopal Guru also is asking and raising the question, the similar question like this Dhammanigam raised in this article on the issue of the empowerment. He's saying that, I go and I see that my sister, uh, my mother, and everyone, they are doing the same job everywhere. Even the sister is married, the same job, same profession they are doing. And then eventually he's raising the question, and Gopal Guru also is raising this moral ethical question on what is empowerment, is how do we actually measure and engage with this debate of empowerment for this scavenging Dalit community woman. Is it that the caste system? Is it that the violence which happens to this community? Is it that the debate which is constantly haunting them? Is it that something which is constantly evidenting, which is an evidence, and which is patriarchy within and outside? What is that? So how do you define this whole idea of the empowerment? Because the government is there and using very flowery words, and I mean, if you look at the debate again by Gandhi and Ambedkar, in order to understand this context where Gandhi says very categorically, it is the Harijan who does this and it's a service to God, which Ambedkar way back said, and which people like Martin McMahon and Biswada Wilson rightly pointed out by accepting that the scavenging community never accepted what Baba Saheb said. Baba Saheb said very categorically, you leave those jobs in the rural India and come and work and get educated, because the important intervention which Ambedkar did is the agitation. I mean, all of us knows the slogan, but then that is the one which is going to go and give and liberate you. So that could be the one way to look at the empowerment debate, bringing the Ambedkar into forefront for this community. And one is to also understand that what kind of, I mean, these are the evidences of the everyday which is there on the minds and the bodies of the scavenging community. And if we look at the whole debate and the ways in which not only the current regime, but within the states also, the parties like our party, which took broom as a symbol. So what does it indicates to us? I think that one should really raise this question, because I have been staying here and I have been witnessing back and forth before pandemic that long period there was no payment of this scavenging community done by the government. And if you remember that all the media and newspapers were reporting that many months there was no payment to them. So there's a whole question of the survival. So they were not lifting the garbage on the road, and eventually. So when one is talking about Swachh Bharat, one is talking about the hygiene, I think it's been very important to understand that the people who do, we never value. And suddenly that the post-pandemic period, I mean, when the COVID came, you would see that most of the health workers, most of the Safai Karmacharis, and I'm sure that this must be happening across, because in Delhi, we have seen that regular basis, the Kudawala used to come and collect the garbage. It was a non-stop work, the kind of commitment, and you must have also news that the AIMS head of this such a employee, he never took a break. He suffered from COVID and time he passed with the COVID. So there's also been a kind of commitment by these people which we never acknowledge, we never recognize, but the ways in which we see this community is that something, it's always been a language of the hate. It's always been a language to put them down. We would see that during the COVID time also, because I have taken a few interviews of the woman in which they categorically say that, and I would not, of course, quote those universities' name here and those institutions' name, but these are the big names within Delhi and within India. And the women were not getting the wages. In fact, that before the COVID, their salary was reduced into 120 rupees. And from 120 to 90 rupees per day, and from 90 some of them were have been chucked out from the job, and you would see that they left with nothing basically. And as I said, that they are also human beings. They also have to have the aspiration to live a life, and some of them are struggling literally day and night, and educating their children in the good school, in the sense that, not nearby, very nearby school, because, in nearby school, people knowing them would boycott the children. But in some of the good schools, like the government schools only, because, I must acknowledge that the AAP's contribution in terms of education was fabulous. So that eventually that, there was a break in the school, because of course the technology is one of the issue which many of the children are facing from the deprived, and there's a whole digital divide for that. And you would see again that within this community also, because the ways in which that patriarchy operates, because number of people who are doing this violence, the son will go to the private school also, which is better off, which is far away, but the daughter will go to the government school. That is one of the findings which I'm mentioning here. And a very critical issue to think and rethink about that, because the ways in which the daughters have been seen in general, and in particular to this community, that why to educate them? Ultimately, she has to get married and go in the other home. I want to particularly focus upon some of the most recent judgment from 2014, and particularly one of the very sensible judge, Justice Arun Mishra from Supreme Court, and he gave a very interesting interview to the Outlook in 2014, in which he said very categorically that no society or nobody in the world, would have this kind of particular kind of, job would be done by these people. And you could see that it's such a heinous job that no community in the world should allow to do to anyone. And sometimes you see that, these days that and I will further quote that him, in no country in the world, people are sent to the gas chambers to die. This is the most inhuman way to treat human beings like this. Further that you would see that some of the intervention which was done by the the lawyers and the public interest litigations which filed by the civil society organization and the groups of the lawyers, which I see is the way forward and very positive, which lauded the modernization of the machine. So the number of schemes are there, and the problem is that many times is that because lack of education, the schemes are not known to the community member. And on the other hand, that the scheme which has been done for this community is not actually seen from their perspective. It is done by the bureaucrats and the government servant, people who live the life. And I think that Patil, am I taking too much time?
Maybe there are questions which participants have. Maybe another 2 minutes, Smita.
5 minutes I will take, and then I will end up.
Smita, 5 minutes. Yeah.
So then the issue is that I think the collective schemes which one has to do it, to getting into this, and then how truly this community can benefit. The second things which I want to argue is that, the decentralization of the work is a very important, in which that one can actually understand and engage in a way, and in the small communities we can able to transfer. The third thing which I think is that modern machines, which is one of the judgment, and now many states, particularly Kerala, Delhi, Maharashtra, very few are there, but then Punjab, they are actually accommodating and the machines rather than this thing. But of course, the Delhi model is they have actually borrowed from again Bangalore. But one has to understand, and I think the important intervention which again did in this context is the Kerala model. Kerala is the first state in India in which that the Kerala government in fact took the initiative, and they kept the and they developed the robot through that, and through that they are doing the manholing. So Kerala is the again first state who has taken a different initiative, and taking the initiative how one should actually rehabilitate these people by giving them the good education, and this is one of the I think that, and then constantly one has to engage that how we should actually get into this. Now coming back to slowly to the COVID situation is that the PPE and the other, the health hygiene, which they are the one who are taking care of the entire cities, even in the small colonies to colonies, in entire, and even in the villages, they have not been given any kind of safety, security, including the face masks. I mean, these are the facts, and and we have seen that in the month of April, that when there was a showering of the flower to the doctors, people started also showering to these workers who are collecting the garbage in the colony in Delhi. But suddenly they remember that they are the one who maintain the hygiene. But then are we really changed the mindset to do something? And are we still going to go and keep, because COVID-19 of course is telling us, and some of the argument which has come up earlier, that COVID has actually equalized the society. I do not subscribe to that, because cutting across the world, because we have seen that from WHO, that from social distancing to we came with that physical distancing, and then people keep saying bodily distancing. But I think that the Indian society is particularly waved in such way and structured in such way that it's very difficult to take out the mindset of the people to accept that they are also human beings. Right? And I think it's a collective responsibility of the feminist friends, also the people who are part of the women's group, women's studies, to look into this matter very seriously and to bring out, because I personally feel that even that, a serious researchers are lacking in this field, particularly in order to understand the plight of the scavenging woman. And I will stop it here, and I would like to take the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smita, for bringing in so many points, and we can't thank you enough, and we would have really loved to hear more, but due to time constraints, we cannot. But it was an enriching session for bringing in interlinkage of caste, poverty, gender, policies, apathy of the state, also of the society, and you have given us so many points to ponder and debate. Can we say that scavenging work is a microcosm of caste in all its import, and the state responses and our responses truly reflect our thinking about the caste system? And while we debate about the plight of scavenging community, are we also moving towards a deliberate attempt of a class blind society, not a casteless society? So what do you think?
I think I do not agree with this argument of the class, because you see, as Ambedkar pointed out in his Castes of India mechanism and their genesis, that caste is an enclosed class. And you would see that in order to understand that, how this category emerged, I very categorically explain in the previous part of my lecture that unlike the pandemic, which we see it came from the foreign countries to the India, from the rural India, these workers came, those who were agricultural labor, or they were the mining laborers, or because of whatever crisis, because of the poverty, they came. And then eventually that, how from one job to the other job those migrant labor shifted and ended up with this job, right? So I would not say that, and I would not in fact, my point which I'm very strongly arguing here is that there's no study done so far on the scavenging woman in which one can actually reveal and understand. And let me also raise a question, counter question, the person who raised me this question, to that, to think about, why is it that the other caste people who might be very poor, not into this profession, if we say that we are actually coming back to the class question, because it intertwine, and the intersectionality model is the most powerful model which feminists use, and we all of us are teaching this, Kimberly Crenshaw. I think it goes hand in hand. So we cannot deny in a country like India, because we are not in Europe. I mean, there's a huge reformation in Europe on several issues. And therefore that, my argument, and I will stand by what I said.
Our next question is, what forces people, especially the women, to opt for this occupation, even if they are educated and can do something else to earn their livelihood? I think you had answered that poverty is the main thing, but yes, please elaborate.
I think among the educated, I think the ways in which, I may agree, disagree, but I really like the central government initiative that quota within quota is implemented. Hopefully it will implement. And one has to see the people who are in the margin, they should be able to get the job first. I mean, my answer is very clear that they are the most deprived. So they should get the job first, those who are educated. And this is one of the case which I forgot to mention. I just would like to say that in Bangalore, it happened because a PhD scholar who did PhD was not getting a job. So what he did, he put the shit to the entire body, and he said that I'm going to go and going to get this job again as a protest. So you just see that that even with the great difficulty, that a person who educates oneself is not getting the job, and the acceptance because of the caste, that is something which is very heinous. I mean, the state should assure that.
One more question we have is what the government committee took measures. Have they taken any measures in terms of increasing salary, health insurance to the scavenger community?
I think there was a PIL filed, which I already mentioned, and yes, if you go and look at the laws, the 1923, and then eventually the Britishers also made a law, 1923 I'm talking about, and eventually you would see then again the laws which came, particularly in 2013. It of course does talk about that the state should assure them everything, whatever raised in the question. the health, hygiene, security, safety, including that in some of the judgment, it has been said that the person who died in 2014 judgment, the Supreme Court very categorically said that if, for instance, that if the man who is gone into a gutter to clean the gutter and out of the gas, the death happened, it is the immediate responsibility of the, the institution or person who is calling. So for individual level also, even the colonies which call in the urban areas, it is their duty to pay them 10 lakhs, but it did not never happen so far. It never happened so far. In fact, it's in one of my interview, the woman said that, look, if now the government is giving the machine, which is a good thing. This machine would have come earlier. Probably my husband, my children would not have lost the father. Further, she says, I'm happy that other children are not going to lose the father. So one has to understand, because it's something that we just because my point which I'm raising through by bringing in the several idea is that actually each of us should really think in this pandemic time that we have seen that how difficult life is even today when the numbers are increasing, the everyday life for all of us. So what would be the life of these people? Or this woman particularly.
Right. By terming the scavenger community as Swasthya Kamgar, as you mentioned, this is a new term that is, will it change the social?
Smita? Hello.
Yeah, Patil,
yeah, because
yeah.
Sangeeta, yeah.
There's one last question. Yeah, there's a last question, which one of the participant has. Will it change the social, cultural, financial issues that the community face?
I think it's a collective work, and I think the government should know, the ways in which the government actually bringing out, and I said the Kerala model again, I think that would be the one way out. And the second position, which is my own position, which many scholars also are arguing from this community particularly, who are part of the petitions and civil society. Dismantling completely, because we have neighboring countries, and I would cite one of the example of Malaysia. It's a political will again of the country and the leader, because when Malaysia was there, in Malaysia 1950 to 1980, they took the initiative to eradicate completely the scavenging, manholing and the manual scavenging. And most of the workers who were there actually were the migrant labor, and some of them were Chinese. But it's a political will of the leader. And today you would see that, and one of the agenda of those leaders rather was that we want to make Malaysia as a tourist nation. And you would see that you can't see that the ways in which it is happening in India. But at the same time, similar things which you would see in South Asia, like neighboring countries like Pakistan is there. In Pakistan, again, is that it's not the Hindu who are doing. It's a Christian community again. It's again, so you have to also see that the whole equation of the religion, which is also engaging in, if we deeply try to again further understand, that's why I raise this point that SCST Atrocity Act, because it's a number of cases. And one of the institutions where I visited, I see that the security guard, the officers, when these women goes, when they do their duty, they will touch their private parts, and where they have to go and say. I mean, I was in the sexual harassment committee serving that particular, and in which that I said very categorically, we want the CCTV camera to be put there, because these women, they are also having fear out of poverty that they will lose the job. Right. So one has to also see that, I mean, it's everyday life which they have to, sustain their own respect, dignity in the everyday life.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Smita. May I now request Patil to say a few words and give vote of thanks.
Yeah, I think so. I hope my screen is, Smita, I should really thank you for a very powerful, for a very powerful session, I should say. In fact, it can't be described as informative. I think that's a very wrong adjective. I think it was a very powerful session. You have basically raised many important issues, and also I think issues which we all are negotiating with in our day-to-day lived realities, but deliberately turning a blind eye to it. So I'm really happy. I should really say that we are not exactly happy, but it was very thoughtful and this extremely, brave on your part to have raised so many issues. So with we look forward to more interactions with you, Smita. This was just the beginning, I should say. This is just the beginning. We hope that we can invite you for a lecture where we can have a closed door interaction and a closed door discussion on some of the issues. The lectures are being recorded, so they are also available on the Facebook for the participants to come back and to ponder on some of the points which have been raised. So I again thanks Smita, and we end the session today. Our next session is on 6th, which is Sunday, and it's at 6:30. And I hope to meet